Thanks to everyone that's been able to check out the recent snare drum videos. After a few questions about the tuning scheme and what I did, I thought it may be fun to do a video to discuss exactly what I'm doing. I've been playing on this Tama Bravura concert snare drum for the last year. I love it, and I thought it'd be fun to talk about some things. Tuning is up to the individual. Today's comments are just what I like doing, what I found works for my own playing. But there are going to be several factors that are going to determine your sound, your tuning scheme, the drum, the heads, your choice of snare strands, your sticks, and most importantly, it's your musical decision. Like tuning will change according to that. So before we get into the details of like actually tuning the heads and the guts and etc., I want to talk to you first about how your implements can affect your sound. I'm going to play 9 different pairs of sticks. I'm not going to change the tuning scheme at all. I'm going to play the same 4 beats so you can hear them consecutively with 9 different pairs of sticks. They're different manufacturers. Some of them are the same stick, but different pitch. As far as the pitch of the sticks, one is high, one low, for example, just so you can hear what the difference of the sticks, the implement that you're using, makes in the tuning. First, well, I realize you're not watching this video to talk about snare drum sticks. We've got plenty of videos for that, as well as snare tuning. I wanted to talk to you about how that affects the sound. And this really occurred to me about a decade and a half ago when my wife and I were dating. My wife is a violinist. She's an amazing musician in person. And when we first started dating, she was looking to buy a new bow. And we visited a luthier in, I believe it was Atlanta, Boston, and New York. And one of the things that struck me that's different than what we do as percussionists is that when she walked in, the luthier asked her to play something on her instrument. He listened for a second, went back, grabbed 4 or 5 bows, brought them back, and asked her to play them. And that concept of like getting the bow to work with the violin was a whole new concept for me, and it really started changing my thoughts on everything. So for example, with my marimba playing at the time, I knew that if a certain artist had designed their signature series on a certain instrument, I knew that those two would blend together well. And that's how all of this started. So that's why I felt it's important to talk about sticks first. Next, your choice of drum heads. We all have our own opinions on this, and that's great. So hopefully we're not going to all sound the same, but we can learn from each other. For me, on this drum, on a concert snare drum, just in general, I prefer a 7mm head for the batter head, and then a 2 or a 3mm head for the resonant head. For the top today, I have a Remo Renaissance Diplomat, and on the bottom, I have a Remo Diplomat snare side. Next, let's talk about tuning. People have their own opinions. Some people will watch this and thank you for discussing this. Some people would be like, there's no way I'm going to tune my drum in that manner. And that's great. That's great. We don't want it to sound the same. We all need to have our own musical opinions. Again, I'm going over the thoughts that what I think works. So for tuning, as a general tuning scheme, if you think about it, is to make sure that the bottom head, the resonant head, is tight so that the snares can easily vibrate when the batter head is struck. So as a general rule, I always want to make sure that the resonant head is higher pitched than the batter head. So when I strike the top head, it should bend, be malleable enough to where it's going to send vibrations to the bottom head and activate those snares. As a general rule for my concert snare drum playing, I like to ensure that I'm playing at the same durometer or hardness every day, like how it feels. I want to make sure that it feels the same every day. And I try my best to tune the batter head to A4. This is roughly the A above middle C. And then the bottom head to a B flat 4. And that's where I like these heads on this Tama drum and how I play. And that's where I end up with my tuning scheme. Some people like to tune a fourth, the resonator head a fourth higher. It's going to depend on your flavor. How you want to cook that meal, it's up to you. But for me, I go with the A flat and B flat 4. Next, probably most importantly with our drums today, is being able to tune the individual strands in your snare strainer system. First of all, it's important to understand what the strands are used for. So in this drum, there are 3 separate strands. On here, I have a nickel wound guitar string, an uncoated stainless cable, and a coated cable. They come with the drum itself. Generally, the first thing I will do is I will tighten the knob on the front side of the drum to ensure that it's where I want it to be. The next thing before I start tuning the individual snare strands is that I also play with a mute on the drum. And this mute is just homemade. I went to, I believe it was Michael's craft store, and they have these kind of foot-long patches of leather. And then I've got some magnets to add weight to keep it on the drum, and I have a magnet that attaches to the rim so it stays still. And this is my go-to. The reason I'm pointing these things out first is so when you start messing with the individual snare knobs, that you're doing it in a manner where you're already set up on how you're going to play. Some people will tune these individual snares with the mute off and then they put the mute on. So it doesn't work for me. Maybe it'll work for you, but just I would start on how you're going to play before you start tuning the individual. So the first thing to notice is that I have placed Sharpie marks as kind of a dial marking to know where I am, to give me a gauge. I will first start for the soft dynamic. I'm going to tune this with the guitar string roughly from pianissimo to roughly mezzo forte. For those of you that like to play on the extreme edge of the drum, you need to check the snare strainer to make sure that it's dialed in properly so you can get response at the edge of the drum. For me, I really never try to go beyond the logo for the Remo crown. I've found that once I get past that crown, that the drum ends up sounding like another instrument. So I try to make sure that my snare sound is consistent throughout the dynamics and it doesn't sound like a different drum when I go to the edge, or play softly rather. So first thing I will do is once I have the front knob where I want it, I will engage the snare unit, so I will turn it on. Then I will loosen the 3 knobs. And I will start with the guitar string, and I will tune that up, and I will check where that is. Then I will detune or loosen that knob 3 full turns. Next, I will go to the uncoated stainless cable, and I will do the same thing, roughly from mezzo piano to fortissimo, and check those dynamics. Do the same thing. I will loosen it up, roughly 3 full turns. Same process for the coated cable, going from mezzo forte to fortissimo, to make sure that when I get at a loud dynamic that the snares are still going to vibrate and they're not going to choke off. At this point, what I'm going to do, if I took notice of where that dial, that Sharpie mark was, I will put them all back into place and I should be able to play. You may find that you need to do some further adjustments because the tension from one string will directly affect the tension of another and how it relates to the head vibration. So sometimes you may find that you need to loosen up a little bit. So for example, sometimes I've noticed that with the guitar string, if I have the coated cable too tight, then it won't allow that guitar string to properly respond. So I'll loosen up the coated cable to make sure that the bottom head is actually vibrating. I find that sometimes we can choke off the snares so much that the bottom head doesn't vibrate, and thus the snares do not vibrate and we don't get a proper snare sound. So realize that they are going to have some interplay with themselves. If you want to hear some performances of this drum, I provided a link that I made almost a year ago for the Tama company, and there's a few recordings of your standard excerpts, as well as one of the movements from one of my snare drum solos. Love to hear from you. If anybody has any questions about snare tuning, or if anybody wants to talk about just tuning in general, I hope you'll leave some comments, and hopefully that will help some of you prepare your concert snare drum.